Hi everyone, it's Adam with Milo's Restoration, and today I've got a video for you about working on this water damaged Dixie dresser. And maybe kind of from the appearance it looks like it's kind of just a little mildly damaged, but there's actually a lot of that veneer that's starting to peel because of the water damage, and you'll see in a minute how much of it I actually had to take off. So I decided that this was going to be a blue pigmented lacquer, and so I got to taking all the hardware off and doing the repairs before cleaning. So this is just my normal cleaning mixture. A lot of the times whenever I use lacquers, I use a mix of about 90-10, and the 90% is naphtha and 10% acetone. And it's just, it's pretty fast. It dries very quickly. Um, I prefer to use crud cutter and water. I think it works a little bit better, but if I just don't really have the time, I'll use the naphtha and acetone mix. Just be careful when you're using this. So anything you're seeing me take off here, it's basically because the water kind of got underneath that veneer and pulled the glue out, and basically it was just hanging on there by a thread. So I had to rip out a lot of that old veneer, and as much as I probably would have liked to just do a restoration on this piece, and it would have been nice to do, I would have really just had to hunt down some mahogany veneer, and it would have been really expensive. So I just decided to go with the pigmented lacquer, but I did have to re-glue some areas of wood and apply some filler and things like that. Just a recommendation, try to keep the filler very thin if you are going to use it. You really don't want it to be thick. It's kind of just like, it's just Bondo, it's automotive filler, and when it's applied, you really don't want it to be too thick because it will probably crack at that point. And it's the same way with cars or any kind of other, automotive restoration work. You never want to put too much filler or glazing on. You want to keep it to a minimum. And even though that looks like a lot, all of it was actually pretty much really thin. I was able to re-glue little pieces of wood that were the same thickness as my veneer, and then I just filled in the imperfections with the filler. And then I sanded it and got it ready for the vinyl sealer. So this is basically the same exact thing if you ever sprayed lacquer undercoater. That's all this is really. It's just a vinyl sealer by Mohawk. It's pigmented, and the color is Smoke Blue by Benjamin Moore. So basically all I do is I use my primer, and as my color coat, I'll spray this on and it'll be whatever color I want, and then I'll just clear coat over it. That's just kind of how I do things now. And in this video, I'm using mostly a turbine spray gun, but I actually did get my new air compressor, installed, so I'm excited to be using my new air compressor gun soon. So a question that I think that I'll probably get on this is, instead of using filler, why not just, you know, rip all the veneer off and use the base wood to paint? And that's a good question, and in many cases that is the right thing to do. Although this case was a little bit different. And the reason for that is because this piece is actually not solid wood. It's like a pressed laminate um, kind of material. So it's basically like made of very, very thin sheets of plywood. And the problem with removing the veneer was that I noticed that whenever I started to heat up the veneer layer, it was kind of making the plywood layers want to delaminate. So really, at that point, the best thing I thought that I could do was just fill the areas and pull off the loose veneer. But, it's always better to remove all the veneer and go back to the base layer if you can. So I didn't get as much film of me just kind of working on this piece as I would have liked to, because there was just a lot to do on this and it took up a lot more time than I was hoping. And on days like that, I usually just try to get through work, and filming is just kind of like a secondary task. But generally speaking, the way that I do this is that I apply like usually 2 to 3 coats of the vinyl sealer, and then on the last coat I just be careful as far as like how I spray it. I try not to get a lot of orange peel in it, and then I try to have to just very sand it like really lightly and make sure not to burn through that color, because that's going to be your color code, and that's kind of one of the downsides to doing it the way that I do it. But it's just a lot better, I've kind of come to learn. So this is the final coat of lacquer, and basically what I'm doing is I'm going to apply 2 coats of gloss lacquer, and I try to really have to do minimal sanding. I wet my spray booth area, and I try to reduce my material enough to where basically I have no orange peel, and I just don't want to get any dry spray or any lap lines or anything like that. And I can maybe make a video about how to set up your gun to kind of get that, you know, good off the gun finish at one point if people are interested in that. So this is Mohawk's lacquer, and it's in gloss, so it's around 80 sheen, and it's thinned by about 10 to 20% with about 5% uh, blush, like no blush or tartar in it. so that kind of helps to slow the dry time some. Okay, so now I'm just putting the hardware back on, and this was not really my favorite piece to work with, honestly. Just all of the water damage and having to rip off all that veneer. It was just a lot of work, and part of me kind of wishes I passed on it. But, you live and you learn, and this is kind of one of those experiences. So I tried to polish out the hardware too, but they're, not brass or something like that. They wouldn't polish. They just kind of turned this kind of dull metal color. And yeah, so I just put them back on as is. I really don't like to paint hardware. So here's the finished piece, and considering all this piece of furniture has been through, I'm pretty happy with it, and I think it will definitely sell pretty quickly. The gloss looks pretty good, and in my opinion, I think it turned out okay. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you want to see more content like this.